Today, I'm going to give you a math quiz. So, what is 2 plus 86 minus 64 divided by 2? Well, if you know the answer to that question, that math question, make sure you know, put in the answer in the comments below and let's see if you got the answer correct. Well, today I want to talk to you about this concept, which is something that I have been a real student of. You see, a long time ago, what happened was that I've always tried to make things sophisticated. You see, because as a consultant, one of the key things, as I mentioned to you before, the one of the key things as a consultant is that I'm always here to look for mistakes. I'm always here to look at where things are suboptimal. I'm always here to look at things that go wrong because if everything is fine, everything is running at optimal level, then there is no role for me as a consultant because then everything is hunky dory. So when I go into a situation, I always tend to look at things and I want to pry it apart and I want to look for what's wrong. Now, because over time, as I mentioned previously in one of the episodes itself, was that I have kind of learned that, while that it's a good mindset and good archetype to have as a consultant, it may not be so good under other circumstances. And so that has led me to rethink about this whole idea of, looking for problems. And so I kind of turned that entire mindset to myself. And so over time, I kind of realized that in order for me to be able to get things done, I need to keep it simple. So I'd like to tell you this story. Some time back was that when I first started my company, um, it was really, really complicated because you see, when I started off as a sole proprietor. Now, as a sole proprietor, obviously the upside is that you are the business is you. The downside, of course, is that if something were to go wrong with the business, you are personally liable. In other words, there is no protection against you because it's not the company that is being sued or being taken to task, but it is you because you and the company are one and the same. And so when I decided that at the point in time when I decided to register the company or register the business as a sole proprietor, the main idea behind that was that I wasn't sure if this is going to take off. And those days when I was going to start the company, it requires a huge amount of capital to even start a very simple company. As an example, you are not able to use just any kind of address as a business address. So you really need to have like a physical office space. And at a point in time, I was sharing with you the other day, I only had like $15 in my bank account, and so there was just no way I could fork out that kind of money to start a company. Whereas when you are starting a sole proprietor, it's a lot easier. It allows you to use your home address as the registered address, and on top of that, there are very very few, if any, legal documents or company resolution and all that jazz for you to fill out. And so it was a straightforward process itself. Now you need to understand that was back in 2002, and so the key idea behind that was that I'm just gonna do this in the trade under the name of the sole proprietor. And if business picks up, then we'll see. If not, it's easier to wind down, struck off a sole proprietor as well. And lo and behold, two years later, business started picking up, and I then decided that I wanted to have a certain level of protection against whatever contract that I'm signing and whatever legal agreements I've got into with the client or any other parties itself. And so what happened was that I then have to convert the sole proprietor to a limited liability company. Now, of course, when you do things like that, you don't just convert, because you would have to seek certain advice. And one of the few advice that I got was that, because I have existing contract, and in my contract itself, there weren't any written agreement to say that I could technically assign that contract to another company if I'm going to change my company. And so there was this possibility that there were certain contracts that the clients might not honor, or I might run into some situations whereby I may not get paid. And so it became something that is so simple became something that is so complicated. And of course, at the end of the day, I went to see some the accountant, and as well as see some lawyers. And at the end of the day, I got it all sorted out. And what was interesting was when I went to the bank to apply for a bank account, everyone was so confused, because the bank account that I needed was for the sole proprietor, but actually the sole proprietor, it's owned by a private limited company. And so, when I go to the banks, I always remember there were a couple of times I have to open a new bank account. And I remember that, the people at the bank, they were so confused, because to them, it's either A or B. It's never A together with B. And so, they haven't quite the precedent, and they were all very confused. And of course, and in that situation, it's a little bit of a reverse, because I am the one who is buying the service. I'm buying the bank services, and they are actually the seller. And even for them, and there was one bank I know in particular, it took us a month before we can set up the bank account, just because people were unclear, and people didn't know that you could kind of do it that way. And so it was really interesting to know. Now, how does that link to what we're going to be talking about here today? I think a lot of time, many things are actually very simple. Now, what do I mean by that? This says, if you go to a landing page, that means you click on an ad, and that ad takes you to a page, and that page has got all this information about what they do, who they are. They tell you this long grandmother story about, their CEO did this, the partner died, and all that stuff, right? And I remember when I was starting out in the internet marketing game, my mentor used to tell me that, oh, Melvin, you have to have this huge, long sales ladder in on the landing page itself. And I'm like, but I don't think anyone reads that. And he's like, oh, you'd be surprised, so there are some people who would read it word for word. Well, the only reason why I would want to read any of their landing pages word for word is where I am so intrigued by their copy that I want to emulate them. And that's why I'm studying it. Because I'm studying, I'm reading every single word there. But if I'm buying, I'm like, one or two paragraphs, and I'm like, okay, I'm done, right? It's either I'm gonna buy or I'm not gonna buy. And and so sometimes where you have all this text on your landing page itself, it can create kind of a illusion that, why are they telling me so many things? I mean, is it really necessary? And the thing was that I am right now experimenting with two types of landing pages. So one type of landing pages is like straight to the point. I tell you what exactly it's the value proposition of opting in, and then I ask, are you going to opt in or not? All right, it's as simple as that. And so it becomes a one action page. In other words, when you land on that page, it's either you take that action that it's there or you get lost. So the whole idea behind that is that you want to be able to attract only the people who are interested in what you have to say, and everybody else who are not interested, they are not going to engage with you, and so you do not want them. You want to eliminate them. You don't even want them on your email list to begin with. And so that's one model that I'm testing. The other model that we're testing is that we're testing the kind of a usual video sales letter kind of a landing page, whereby you use lots of I wouldn't say hype, but you use a lot of copy to kind of convince someone that this is the thing for you. And there is even a structure that you would do it. So the structure is simply something like this. We talked about the pain point, and once you have the pain point itself, you then go into the the demonstration of who you are and where you're at now. And of course, where you're at now, it's where your prospects want to be, right? And so you kind of tell people who you are, where you're at now, and then you tell them that, but it wasn't always like that. I started out like this. I started out where I had no views on my YouTube channel. I had no followers. I barely had 100 followers on my LinkedIn, for example. And this was how I started out. But then, I did this, I did this, I did this, and still nothing happened until I met this one person, and this one person literally changed my life. And this person taught me this one thing. Now, but before I tell you what this one thing is, I'd like to tell you what I have. And so what I have is, I have kind of distilled this one thing down into a series of program or whatever the case may be. And in this whole process itself, what you're going to do is you will learn the steps that I went through, and then to be able to use it to to solve your problem itself. And so if you're interested in that one thing, this is where you opt in below, right? So it's a very long way of stating the value proposition. I guess the at the end of the day, it's really about choices. Because if you ask me, right, I'm the type that, when I land on the site, it's either I know I'm gonna do it or not. And even if I'm gonna do it, i.e. opt in, even if you provide me with a strong lead magnet, even if you provide me with a really, really enticing case of a lead magnet, what I'm going to do is, I'm probably going to just opt in once I download the whatever thing that you are giving me, and then I'll unsubscribe almost immediately. And so, it at the end of the day, it's not really so much about how many people click and how many people opt in, but it's about retention. And so I was telling my team that I kind of prefer the simplistic model because I believe that simplicity sells. But the team wasn't so convinced. And so, we say that, well, the only way that we could kind of get over this disagreement or this argument or this opinion, right? Because at the end of the day, it really comes down to just an opinion. So so we say the only way that we can settle this thing is if we put it to a test. And so what we're gonna do is, in the course of the next couple of days, we are going to put up this two landing pages. One is going to be just simple and say that, well, opt in if you want this, and this is what you're getting. The other one is that, oh, are you facing this problem? I used to face this problem, but now because of that one thing, I am where I am now, which is where you want to be. And, and I have been doing all these cool things, but it wasn't always like that. And I started out like this, and then I met this person, or I discovered this one thing, and this one thing led me to where I am. Now, if you want this one thing, this is what you could do right now. You can opt in, and I will bombard you with a million emails every day until you give up and you give me your credit card. Right? So that was the approach. I mean, at the end of the day, I guess the only way to settle this score is to really test it out. So, what about you? What's your preference like? Are you the type that goes for simplicity, or are you the type that would kind of want to complicate things, want to make things a little bit more interesting, and so to make it uh, complicated, to say the least. All right. So have you got the answer to that question itself? What is 2 plus 68 minus 64 divided by 2? Well, the answer is the same as 2 plus 1. And with that, thank you for watching. And this is the Melvin Live Show. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye bye.